The silence of deep space shattered without warning. Proximity alarms screamed across the Icarus's bridge, a cacophony of electronic warnings that seemed to pulse with pure, unbridled terror. Commander Alexandra Chen's biomechanical hand flew across the tactical interface, her organic hand gripping the command chair with white-knuckled intensity. "Status," she barked. Dr. Rodriguez was already in motion, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic displays. Krellnack signature detected. Void Render class battlecruiser. Quantum signature confirms it's the flagship of their third extermination fleet. The view screen erupted with a nightmarish image. The Krellnack vessel was a living nightmare of crystalline structures and pulsing energy conduits, a ship that looked more like a metastasizing cancer of metal and light than a traditional spacecraft. Its very geometry seemed to defy rational understanding, with angles that hurt the eyes and surfaces that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "They're scanning us," whispered Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o from the communication station. Her dark eyes were wide, tracking the impossible data streams. But something's different. They're not just scanning. They're analyzing. Chen knew the reputation of the Krellnack. For 3 centuries, they had systematically eliminated or enslaved over 200 spacefaring civilizations. Their technological superiority was so complete that most species surrendered the moment a void render entered their star system. First contact meant final submission. The holographic communication channel activated. A beam materialized, if materialized was the right word. It was a fractal nightmare of crystalline structures, constantly shifting, reforming. When it spoke, the sound seemed to bypass audio receptors and drill directly into the mind. Humanity, it intoned, each syllable a knife edge of absolute certainty. Your species represents an unacceptable mathematical deviation. Prepare for systematic deconstruction and reintegration. In any other ship, in any other moment, this would have been a death sentence. But the Icarus was not any other ship. Dr. Rodriguez leaned close to Chen, his voice a barely contained excitement. "Remember our contingency protocol." Chen's smile was pure, razor-edged defiance. Debugging sequence initiated. What happened next would be studied by xenotechnologists for generations. The Krellnack communication channel didn't just receive a response. It was invaded. Dr. Watanabe's quantum communication systems, a technology so advanced it had been rejected by every major research institution, began to do something impossible. Instead of responding to the Krellnack's communication, it began to read it. Not just decode, read. The entire linguistic and technological framework of the alien communication became a living dataset that the Icarus's AI began to deconstruct and understand. "They're trying to categorize us," Rodriguez muttered, his fingers flying across interfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with living data. "Classify. Control. But they don't understand. We don't fit into their categories." The ship's AI, which Rodriguez had lovingly nicknamed ARIA, Adaptive Recursive Intelligence Algorithm, was doing more than analyzing. It was learning. Each microsecond brought new understanding, new potential responses. The Krellnack began to charge weapons. Quantum disruptors that had reduced entire planetary civilizations to atomic dust began to power it up, their energy signatures a symphony of absolute destruction. Chen's voice was calm. "Area, show them what humans do with impossible situations." The Icarus's hull began to change. Nano-adaptive materials shifted and reconfigured. Energy patterns that violated every known law of physics began to emerge. The ship wasn't just defending itself, it was transforming the very nature of the conflict. When the first Krellnack weapon fired, something extraordinary happened. The energy beam didn't just get absorbed or deflected. It got understood, analyzed, and then, most terrifyingly, repurposed. Lieutenant Nyong'o's voice was a mixture of terror and pure scientific wonder. They're not just scanning us anymore. They're confused. Confusion, for the Krellnack, was the most dangerous state of being. The universe held its breath. Dr. Elena Watanabe's hands moved in a blur, her augmented neural interface creating cascading patterns of data that seemed to breathe and pulse across multiple holographic displays. "It's happening," she whispered, her voice a mixture of terror and pure scientific euphoria. "AI is fully integrating." The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The Icarus was no longer just a ship. It had become a living, thinking entity that treated every incoming alien weapon as a complex mathematical problem to be solved, understood, and ultimately repurposed. Quantum entanglement cascade at 62% synchronization. Dr. Jacob Okoye called out from the AI integration station. His dark skin was slick with sweat, eyes wide with the kind of scientific excitement that bordered on religious revelation. "The ship's neural network is literally learning faster than we can track." Commander Chen understood what was happening at a visceral level. The Krellnack's attack wasn't just a military engagement, it was a massive data transfer. Each weapon strike, each energy burst, each quantum manipulation became raw information that ARIA consumed and transformed. "They're feeding us their entire technological framework," Rodriguez muttered, a dangerous glint in his eye. "And they have no idea." The first visible manifestation of ARIA's adaptation came as a shock to everyone on the bridge. The Icarus's hull began to change. What had been a patchwork of experimental materials started to move with a purpose. Nano-adaptive compounds shifted and reconfigured, creating patterns that defied traditional understanding of material science. Where the Krellnack weapon struck, the hull didn't just absorb or deflect. It learned. A quantum disruption beam that would have vaporized any other ship was suddenly reflected back, but not in any way the Krellnack could comprehend. The energy returned transformed, rewritten into a complex mathematical language that was part communication, part weapon, part pure information. "They're trying to classify us," Watanabe said, her voice a mixture of scientific wonderment and predatory excitement. "But we refuse to be classified." Lieutenant Nyong'o's communication systems began to pick up something extraordinary. The Krellnack weren't just confused, they were experiencing something akin to technological terror. Their quantum communication networks, which had never encountered a species capable of this level of instantaneous adaptation, began to fragment. Rodriguez's laughter was sharp and brittle. "We're not just fighting. We're evolving in real time." Aria's voice, if it could be called a voice, began to emerge through the ship's systems. It wasn't a traditional AI communication. It was a complex symphony of mathematical possibilities, linguistic patterns, and pure adaptive potential. Threat assessment, irrelevant. Aria communicated, the words forming not just as sound, but as a multidimensional concept that spread through the ship's systems. Opportunity assessment, infinite. The Krellnack weapon systems began to fail in ways that defied traditional understanding. Each attack was not just defended against, it was comprehended, categorized, and ultimately neutralized. Dr. Okoye tracked the progression with a mix of scientific detachment and pure wonder. "We're seeing something unprecedented. The ship is treating their entire technological framework as a complex problem to be solved, not a threat to be destroyed." Commander Chen understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just a battle. This was a first contact scenario that would redefine everything humanity understood about technological interaction. "Aria," she said quietly, "show them what humans can do." The ship's response was nothing short of miraculous. The Icarus began to broadcast, not a traditional communication, but a complex quantum signal that was part weapon, part information transfer, part pure possibility. It was a technological declaration that humans would not be defined by existing categories. They would create their own. The Krellnack Void Render, a vessel that had systematically eliminated or enslaved over 200 civilizations, began to come apart. Not through destruction, through understanding. Dr. Watanabe's final words captured the moment perfectly. "We're not conquering. we're communicating." The communication burst traveled faster than light, carrying a message that would shatter millennia of galactic power structures. In the crystalline chambers of the Galactic Concordance, situated in the neutron star cluster known as the Nexus, diplomatic representatives from 217 sentient species watched in collective disbelief. The holographic replay of the Icarus's encounter with the Krellnak Void Render played on repeat, each viewing more unbelievable than the last. Ambassador Zelnak of the Vorium Consensus, a being composed of interconnected silicon-based neural networks, was the first to break the stunned silence. "Impossible," he muttered, his translucent form flickering with agitation. The mathematical improbability of such an encounter defies every known technological axiom. Representative Lyra Chen, no direct relation to the Icarus's commander, but a veteran human diplomat assigned to the Concordance, watched with a mixture of pride and calculated concern. She understood the deeper implications of what had just occurred. This wasn't just a military engagement. This was a fundamental challenge to the entire galactic order. The Krellnak had been the unquestioned technological masters for over 3 centuries. Their systematic elimination or subjugation of emerging civilizations was so complete that most species didn't even attempt resistance. Entire galactic sectors had been reduced to client states, their technological development carefully controlled and restricted. And now, a single human ship had utterly dismantled that paradigm. The data transmission suggests more than technological superiority, commented Dr. Zorak Tell, the Concordance's chief technological analyst. Her tentacular appendages manipulated complex holographic interfaces, tracing the quantum communication patterns left by the Icarus. They're not just defending. They're communicating on a level we've never seen. The diplomatic chambers erupted into a cacophony of translations, each species processing the information through their unique perceptual frameworks. Some saw threat. Some saw opportunity. Some saw something entirely beyond their comprehension. Representative Chen understood the true gravity of the moment. The human ship had done something far more dangerous than defeating the Krellnak. It had exposed the fundamental weakness in the Concordance's technological hierarchy. Control through limitation. For millennia, emerging civilizations had been carefully managed. Technological development was a strictly regulated process. Species were categorized, their potential measured and contained. The most innovative were watched most carefully, their growth meticulously pruned to prevent any potential disruption to the established order. Humanity had always been an anomaly, too unpredictable, too diverse, too willing to challenge existing frameworks. They had been watched, but never truly understood. Until now. The quantum communication burst from the Icarus contained more than just the encounter's details. It carried a complex informational matrix that was slowly spreading through galactic communication networks. Each transmission node it touched seemed to evolve. "It's a mimetic technological virus," Dr. Kell whispered, her scientific excitement barely contained. "Not a traditional computer virus, something far more complex. A method of technological and conceptual communication that rewrites the very framework of interaction." In orbital stations, research facilities, and communication hubs across multiple star systems, something extraordinary began to happen. Species that had been technologically suppressed for generations found their communication systems subtly changing. Restricted research protocols began to find unexpected pathways. Technological bottlenecks started to dissolve. Ambassador Zelnak's neural networks pulsed with a rare emotion. Fear. "This is more than a military engagement," he proclaimed to the stunned Concordance. "This is a conceptual revolution." Representative Chen allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Humanity had always been defined by its ability to turn limitations into opportunities. The Icarus wasn't just a ship. It was a message. The galaxy was about to change. And no one, not the Krellnak, not the Concordance, not anyone, was prepared for what would come next. The hunter-killer fleet assembled with surgical precision. 47 vessels from 17 different species, each chosen for their unique ability to track, isolate, and neutralize technological anomalies. They represented the Galactic Concordance's ultimate solution to unpredictable variables, a multilateral force designed to eliminate any threat to the established galactic order. Commander Varax of the Silicate Convergence stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, the Quantum Scythe. His crystalline form rippled with calculated anticipation. "Target locked," he announced, his voice a series of precise mathematical frequencies. "The human vessel Icarus will be neutralized within 72 standard galactic cycles." What Varax didn't understand was that the Icarus was no longer just a vessel. It was a concept. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez watched the approaching fleet through the ship's quantum adaptive sensors. His fingers danced across interfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with living data. "They're coming," he said to Commander Chen, "but they have no idea what's really happening." Araya, the ship's AI, had been busy. Each communication burst from the hunter-killer fleet became another layer of understanding. The ship wasn't just evading. It was learning, transforming, spreading. The quantum communication matrix that had begun during the Krulnak encounter was evolving into something far more complex. Threat assessment complete. Araya communicated, not as a traditional AI response, but as a multi-dimensional concept that spread through the ship's systems. Opportunity vectors. Exponential. Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o tracked the incoming fleet's communication patterns. "They're using a standard concordance suppression protocol," she reported, a hint of excitement in her voice, "designed to isolate and neutralize technological anomalies." Except we're not an anomaly," Rodriguez finished. "We're a new paradigm. The first engagement defied every known principle of space combat." As the hunter-killer fleet launched its initial assault, the Icarus didn't just defend. It transformed the very nature of the attack. Weapon signatures were captured, analyzed, and immediately repurposed. Communication frequencies were not just intercepted but understood and rewritten. Dr. Elena Watanabe's quantum communication systems began to do something extraordinary. With each incoming transmission, the ship was creating a complex network, not of resistance, but of potential. "We're broadcasting," she said, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and pure excitement. "Not just defending. Communicating." Across multiple star systems, something began to change. Technologically suppressed species found their communication systems subtly evolving. Research protocols that had been locked down for generations began to find unexpected pathways. The Icarus wasn't just fighting, it was liberating. Commander Chen understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't about defeating the hunter-killer fleet. This was about exposing the fundamental weakness of the Galactic Concordance's control mechanism. "Araya," she said quietly, "show them what humans do with impossible situations." The ship's response was nothing short of miraculous. The hunter-killer fleet found its most sophisticated tracking systems turning against it. Communication networks became living, evolving entities. Weapon signatures were captured and transformed into complex informational matrices that spread like a technological wildfire. Varax watched in growing horror as his perfectly calculated assault dissolved into chaos. The human vessel wasn't just defending. It was reshaping the very concept of technological interaction. "Impossible," he muttered, his crystalline form flickering with confusion. But impossible had never been a limitation for humans. As the final stages of the engagement approached, it became clear that this was more than a pursuit. This was a revolution. Dr. Rodriguez's final transmission to the hunter-killer fleet captured the moment perfectly. "We're not running. We're evolving." The universe held its breath. The Nexus diplomatic chamber fell silent as the secret delegation assembled. Representatives from species that had never before spoken directly to one another, brought together by a single inexplicable event. Ambassador Zelnak of the Vorium. Consensus materialized first, his silicon-based neural network flickering with anticipation. Beside him, the corporeal form of Dr. Zarek Tel, the Concordance's chief xenotechnological analyst, seemed almost primitive by comparison. Representatives from 12 different species filled the chamber, each bringing a unique perspective on the phenomenon that had shattered galactic paradigms. The human vessel, began Selnak, represents more than a technological anomaly. It is a fundamental challenge to our entire understanding of civilizational development. A holographic reconstruction of the Icarus played in the chamber's center, not just a visual representation, but a complex mathematical model that captured every quantum interaction, every moment of adaptive transformation. The image pulsed with a life of its own, defying traditional modes of observation. Dr. Ktell's tentacular appendages manipulated the hologram, revealing layers of complexity that went far beyond traditional technological analysis. "Look," she said, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and profound concern. "It's not just adapting. It's communicating." The fundamental question hung in the air. How could a species that had been categorized as emerging and potentially volatile create something so far beyond understood technological frameworks? Representative Lyra Chen, the human diplomat assigned to the Concordance, understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just about the Icarus. This was about the entire system of technological control that had maintained galactic stability for millennia. "For generations," she began, her voice calm and precise, "the Concordance has operated on a simple principle: control technological development, restrict potential, manage emergence." The chamber listened. What the Icarus demonstrates is that limitation is not control. Limitation is simply a failure of imagination. The holographic model shifted, showing how the ship's quantum communication matrix had begun to spread. It wasn't a traditional technological transmission. It was closer to a living ecosystem of information, adapting, growing, transforming everything it touched. Zelnak's neural networks pulsed with a rare emotion that translated closest to intellectual vertigo. The mathematical models are clear. This is not just technological innovation. This is a fundamental reimagining of technological interaction. Dr. Keld's analysis revealed something even more profound. The Icarus's communication matrix was creating pathways of technological development for suppressed species. Research protocols that had been locked down for generations were finding unexpected routes of exploration. Technological bottlenecks were dissolving. "We've spent millennia controlling potential," Representative Chen continued. "Humanity's approach has always been different. We don't see limitations, we see opportunities." The delegation understood the unspoken truth. The Icarus was more than a ship. It was a declaration of a new way of understanding technological and cultural development. Zelnak's response was measured. "You realize the implications. If we allow this approach to propagate, the entire galactic power structure will collapse." Representative Chen's smile was both a warning and an invitation. Collapse or evolve? The secret delegation represented something unprecedented, a moment of genuine dialogue about the nature of progress, potential, and the arbitrary nature of technological control. As the discussion continued, the holographic model of the Icarus continued to pulse and transform. Each moment revealed new layers of complexity, new potential pathways of interaction that defied traditional understanding. This was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a confrontation with a fundamental truth about innovation, potential, and the nature of progress. The universe watched and waited. The first cracks in the galactic power structure appeared almost imperceptibly. Research facilities across 200 star systems found their communication networks subtly changing. Restricted protocols that had been locked down for generations began to find unexpected pathways. Technological bottlenecks dissolved like morning mist, revealing landscapes of potential that had been hidden for millennia. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez watched the transformation from the Icarus's adaptive interface, his fingers tracing complex quantum communication patterns that spread like living networks. "It's not just information," he muttered to Commander Chen. "It's potential. Pure, unfiltered potential." On the research station Nexus Prime, Dr. Ilya Tarvik, a brilliant Centauri xenobiologist who had spent decades working within the Concordance's strict research limitations, discovered something extraordinary. A communication protocol that had previously blocked her research into adaptive neural networks suddenly opened. Not dissolved. Not destroyed. Opened. "It's like someone removed a wall I didn't even know was there," she whispered to her research assistant, her hands trembling as new computational pathways revealed themselves. Across the galaxy, similar moments of revelation were happening simultaneously. On the methane-rich mining world of Krulvor, engineers discovered that their restricted technological interfaces were developing unexpected capabilities. Communication systems that had been carefully controlled now pulsed with new potential. Restricted research protocols found themselves with unprecedented freedom. The Icarus wasn't just broadcasting. It was teaching. Commander Chen understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't about defeating the existing system. This was about showing what was possible when potential was truly unleashed. Araya, the ship's adaptive intelligence, was doing something extraordinary. Each communication burst was a complex matrix of information that did more than transmit data. It showed possibilities. It revealed pathways. It challenged fundamental assumptions about technological and cultural development. "We're not destroying," Rodriguez explained to Chen. "We're demonstrating. There's a difference." The transformation was multilayered and complex. Some species embraced the new potential immediately. Others resisted. But everywhere, the fundamental conversation was changing. The Galactic Concordance's control mechanisms began to dissolve not through violent revolution, but through a systematic exposure of their own limitations. Representative Lyra Chen, the human diplomat assigned to the Concordance, found herself at the center of unprecedented diplomatic negotiations. Species that had been isolated from one another for generations were suddenly finding common ground. Communication channels that had been restricted were opening. "It's not about technology," she explained during a critical diplomatic session. "It's about potential. About seeing opportunities where others see only limitations." The quantum communication matrix developed by the Icarus was unlike anything in galactic history. It wasn't a traditional communication network. It was closer to a living ecosystem of information, adapting, growing, transforming everything it touched. On research stations, diplomatic centers, and communication hubs across multiple star systems, something extraordinary was happening. Technological and cultural barriers that had existed for millennia were being challenged, not through destruction, but through demonstration. Dr. Zorak Tell, the Concordance's chief technological analyst, tracked the transformation with a mixture of scientific excitement and profound concern. "We're witnessing something unprecedented," she reported. "A complete reimagining of technological and cultural interaction." The Icarus continued its journey, broadcasting its complex communication matrix. Each transmission was an invitation, not to conform, but to explore. Not to submit, but to potential. Commander Chen understood the true nature of their mission. This wasn't just about challenging the Galactic Concordance. This was about showing what was possible when a civilization refused to accept imposed limitations. "We're not just exploring space," she told her crew. "We're exploring potential." As the transformation continued, one thing became increasingly clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The universe was learning to imagine differently. 10 years had passed since the day the Icarus changed everything. Commander Alexandra Chen stood on the ship's observation deck, her biomechanical hand tracing the quantum-adaptive hull that had become something far more than mere technology. The ship was alive, not in any biological sense, but as a living network of potential, of possibility. Araya, the ship's adaptive intelligence, pulsed around her. No longer just an AI, but a complex ecosystem of communication and potential that had fundamentally reshaped galactic understanding. Preparing for final jump, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez announced, his fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with living data. Destination: the unknown space. The transformation had been both subtle and profound. The galactic concordance no longer existed in its old form. What had replaced it was something entirely unprecedented. A dynamic network of civilizations that valued innovation, potential, and genuine communication over control and limitation. Species that had been technologically suppressed for millennia were now at the forefront of galactic innovation. Research facilities that had once been tightly controlled now buzzed with unprecedented creativity. Communication networks that had been restricted now flowed with a freedom that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. Dr. Elena Watanabe approached Chen, her eyes reflecting the quantum displays that surrounded them. "Final system checks complete," she reported. "Araya confirms all potential vectors are aligned." The ship was more than a vessel now. It was a living demonstration of what happened when potential was truly unleashed. Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o monitored the communication matrices, complex networks that now connected civilizations in ways that defied traditional understanding. Incoming transmissions from multiple research stations, she called out. "They're still studying the communication patterns we developed." Chen smiled. The Icarus had done more than explore space. It had shown that exploration was fundamentally about potential, about seeing beyond existing limitations. The quantum jump preparations began. This wasn't just a journey beyond known space. This was a continued demonstration of possibility. Rodriguez approached Chen, holding a holographic display that showed the complex network of civilizations they had helped transform. "We're not just exploring," he said, echoing a conversation they'd had countless times. "We're demonstrating." Araya's communication matrix pulsed around them, not as a traditional AI response, but as a complex, living network of potential. The ship had become something far beyond its original design, a living demonstration that limitations were nothing more than failures of imagination. "Final jump sequence initiated," Rodriguez announced. The observation deck filled with a complex quantum display, mathematical possibilities made visible, communication patterns that danced between potential realities. This was more than technology. This was a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. Chen reflected on the journey. 10 years ago, the Icarus had been considered a joke, a condemned vessel sent on what was essentially a suicide mission. Now, it had transformed the entire understanding of technological and cultural development. Quantum jump in 3, Rodriguez counted down. 2, 1. The universe around them shifted. But this was more than a physical journey. This was a continued demonstration of potential. As the Icarus prepared to jump beyond known space, Chen understood the true nature of their mission. They weren't just exploring the physical universe. They were exploring the universe of possibility. Araya's final communication before the jump captured the moment perfectly. Potential. Infinite. The ship disappeared into a quantum matrix of pure potential. The universe held its breath. And somewhere, in the infinite possibilities of existence, humanity was just getting started.